You keep looking out there like something is missing, like the next idea, the next opportunity, or the next breakthrough is going to show up and finally make everything make sense. And for a moment, it feels like progress because you are engaged, you are learning, and you are collecting. But when it is time to act, nothing changes. And that is not because you are incapable, it is because you are still looking in the wrong direction for what actually moves your life forward. The issue is not access, and it is not a lack of information. The issue is avoidance, and avoidance has a way of disguising itself so well that you do not always recognize it for what it is. Because sometimes it looks like preparation, sometimes it looks like planning, and sometimes it feels like you are being responsible. But underneath all of that is a pattern of not acting on what you already know. You are not lacking knowledge. You are avoiding application. And that is a hard truth because it removes the excuse that something outside of you needs to change before you can move. And once that excuse is gone, you are left with responsibility. And responsibility means you now have to decide whether you are going to act or continue to delay. Think about how many times you have told yourself you were going to do something and then did not follow through. Think about how many ideas you have had that never moved past the thinking stage. Think about how many times you recognized a pattern in your life, but chose not to correct it. None of that disappeared. It stayed with you, and over time, it built pressure that now shows up as frustration because you can feel the gap between what you know and what you are doing. That gap is where momentum is lost. Not because you are not capable, but because you keep interrupting your own execution. And every time you interrupt yourself, you reset your progress. You weaken your confidence, and you reinforce a pattern that tells you it is easier to wait than it is to act, even when you know action is exactly what is required. The longer you stay in that pattern, the more normal it becomes. And once it feels normal, you stop questioning it, you stop challenging it, and you begin to accept it as your process, even though it is not producing the results you actually want. And that is where time begins to slip without progress. You already know what you have been avoiding. It is not hidden. It shows up in your thoughts. It shows up when you pause. And it shows up when you are honest with yourself. You know where you have been inconsistent. You know where you have been holding back. And you know where you have been choosing distraction instead of direction. And the issue is not awareness. The issue is confrontation. Because once you confront it, you remove your ability to make excuses. And once excuses are removed, responsibility becomes clear, and responsibility gives you direction. It tells you exactly where your effort needs to go instead of spreading your energy across things that do not move you forward. So instead of continuing to search outside of yourself, you have to shift your focus inward. Not to overthink, but to identify what is already clear, because clarity is not something you always find before action. Many times, clarity is something that forms because you decide to act on what you already understand. That means you stop asking what else you need and start asking what you have been ignoring. You stop looking for something new and start using what is already available to you. And you stop waiting for the perfect moment, because the perfect moment does not create movement. Your decision does. Once you make that shift, something changes in how you operate. You begin to trust yourself again, not because everything is perfect, but because you are proving to yourself that you can act without waiting for perfection. And that builds a level of confidence that no amount of external validation can replace. Momentum begins to form when you stay in motion long enough for your efforts to connect, not when you move fast for a short period of time and then stop, but when you continue even when it would be easier to pause. Because consistency is what turns effort into results, and results are what reinforce your belief in what you are doing. This is where most people fall short, not because they lack ability, but because they stop to too soon. They question themselves too quickly, and they return to searching instead of continuing to build. And every time they do that, they reset their progress and convince themselves they need something else when what they really need is to stay in motion. You do not need another breakthrough. You need to stop breaking your own momentum, because every interruption delays your results, and every delay strengthens the pattern of hesitation, and that pattern becomes harder to break the longer it is repeated without correction. You have to become someone who follows through even when it is inconvenient, even when it is uncomfortable, and even when it does not feel like it is working yet. Because most things do not show results immediately. They show results after you have stayed with them long enough for them to develop. That is where discipline comes in, not as something extreme, but as something steady, something that keeps you moving when your emotions try to slow you down, something that keeps you focused when distractions start to pull your attention away from what matters most. Distraction is another way avoidance shows up. It feels productive, it feels engaging, but it does not move anything forward. And the more you entertain it, the more you delay the very thing that would actually create progress in your life. And over time, that delay becomes a habit that is difficult to break. So you have to decide what you are going to commit to, not what you are going to think about, not what you are going to consider, but what you are going to execute consistently. Because consistency is what separates effort from results. And without it, nothing compounds. Once you make that decision and follow through, you will start to notice something different. Your actions begin to align, your focus becomes clearer, and your confidence starts to build. Not because you are telling yourself you can do it, but because you are showing yourself that you are doing it. That shift is what changes everything. Because once you see yourself executing consistently, you stop doubting your ability to move forward, and you start trusting your ability to produce results. And that trust becomes the foundation for everything you build next. You do not need more information. You do not need more time to think, and you do not need to wait for conditions to feel right. What you need is to stop avoiding what is already clear and start acting on it consistently. Because action is what creates change, not intention, not potential, and not preparation. So if you have been feeling stuck, the answer is not out there. It is in the actions you have been avoiding. It is in the decisions you have been delaying. And it is in the consistency you have not yet committed to. And once you face that honestly, you give yourself the opportunity to change it. You stop resetting yourself. You stop stepping away from what already works. And you stop acting like the next answer is somewhere else. Because the more you do that, the longer you delay what is already available to you. Stay with what works. Act on what you know. And give your effort time to produce. Because that is how momentum is built. And that is how results become consistent instead of occasional. You are not missing anything. You are delaying something. And once you stop delaying and start executing, everything begins to shift in a way that is real, measurable, and sustainable. That is how you move forward. Not by searching, but by acting. Not by waiting, but by committing. And not by looking out there, but by confronting what is already in here and using it with intention.